So why don't we talk a little bit tonight about how to win this next stage. And this next stage is one of the places that I think people sometimes can get stuck or struggle a little bit. And they can struggle a little bit because in their mind, they start to worry a little bit about the wrong things. And they get themselves kind of wrapped around the axle. So the goal really over the next sort of 10 or so weeks is to write 20,000 words of okay stories. Now, when I say this out loud to my classes, people sometimes look at me like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, why would you force us to do this? Can I still drop the class? Like, this seems like a terrible idea, right? And I get it, right? 20,000 words seems like a lot of words. And so this is the response that I oftentimes see when I look out in the classroom. It's like, whoa, are you for real? And I am for real. And I will tell you that typically every semester, every student hits this mark. If they don't, they're close. The reason for it is that I want you to think back to what type of content we're writing, because that's the important thing. We talked about before that most of us think of when we turn in something that it needs to be really good, it needs to be polished. I am not evaluating you on the quality of your first drafts. I'm evaluating you on have you been able to use the tools to create first drafts that are promising. Most of the work that you do will involve subsequent revisions, multiple ones. You'll have lots of help to make it final, but the important thing to know is if we don't have words down out of your head, we can't actually make them better. So here's the kind of ways to think about this one. I want you to understand that kind of what we're ultimately doing in this process is taking your work through this journey. What we've been doing for the last month and we'll continue to do is focusing on research, whether it's from interviews or from secondary interviews. We're really doing those sorts of things to get this content in a way that's interesting to us, find stories. Then what we do is we organize it. We say, great, I got all this content, all these quotes and stuff like that. Let me inventory it into sort of a structure I might have for a story. And then we're going to take that and structure it into a way to tell a story, and we're going to fill in the gaps. It's not something that, again, I want you to think about sitting down and writing these words. A lot of the stuff that you're going to be doing is taking the work you've been doing and just sort of adding more and more layers of structure. That's kind of what it is. So the fact that you do an interview with someone, it really does lead to a ton of great content that you're going to put in. Many of you will realize that when you do great interviews, secondary or primary, from those you're going to generate, hundreds of words of sort of quotes that you can use. So you don't have to make up a quote, you can just write the quote down. And suddenly now, if you see that a third to half of your story that you write is with quotes, you're halfway there already. So that's the important thing. The second thing to understand really is when you're thinking about the writing that I want you to do for the next 10 weeks, is it's all about first drafts. It's a really important thing that I think people sometimes stress out about, is they worry that this has to be good. It doesn't. It really doesn't have to be. I know you're laughing. You're like, this can't be right. He can't actually be saying this. And I know, this is one of the reasons why sometimes people, in English departments will think, this guy's a nut. Why would he say that one? But what I want you to understand is that, what's important to understand is if you wind up learning how to structure stories, we can make them better. But if you wind up trying to focus on just making them great, you'll never get better. You'll never learn. And so that's the important thing to understand, is that's why the editor is so critical. It'll help you kind of keep focused on first drafts. The second thing to understand is that over the next 10 weeks, each of you are going to find yourself falling into one of the three paths we talked about. Now, some of you are going to basically say, okay, 20,000 words, 10 weeks, I can do the math, right? 2,000 words a week, right? Okay, I can do that, right? That doesn't seem that ridiculous. If you can write, 750 words an hour, that's, 2 to 4 hours a week. I can do that one, right? Chip away at it maybe every day or every week. So that's some portion of you. Another portion of you is going to be like, I can't commit to that one, but if the spirit strikes you, you'll do it. So last week, I sat down I hadn't written anything for the last 3 weeks. I sat down on Tuesday night, and I found myself inspired. It was 9:30 at night. My kids had been in bed. I was sitting down there, and I pulled out the laptop, and I started going. I started writing, and I started writing and writing and writing. Finally, I looked up. It was 2:30 in the morning, and I'd written almost 4,000 words. All right. So what that was, it was I had an episode where I was inspired and I wrote. And so some of you will find that to play. So again, if you think about it in that way, maybe you're someone who writes 4,000 words in one of these episodes right there. 5 episodes over the next bit. So you might have a couple of those ones. You might use something on sort of Thanksgiving, whatever it is. That's the other one. The last one, and do you know who you are? You're going to look at this experience and be like, life's busy, I might write a little bit, but what's just going to happen? December 5th rolls around. You're going to look at your content inventory, and you're going to use a curse word. A bad one, not a nice one. And you're going to look and you're going to say, oh boy, I got 10 days left. What am I going to do? And what you're going to do is you're going to do it. And you're going to finish. And this is something that I think seems surprising, seems impossible. How can it possibly happen? I've had multiple authors write 20,000 words or more in less than 5 days. All right? So I don't want you to sit here and freak out at yourself. Like sometimes people will get really nervous and say, I can't keep up, I'm behind, I'm not writing every week. That is totally okay. I just want you to know though, like it's going to be more painful if you wait till the end, but it's doable. So that's the important thing to understand is we race towards this one. Don't get in your head in these sorts of ways and worry about it. Like if you miss a week of writing because you've got other stuff, that's okay. If you find yourself that you're having these episodes where you're writing, lean into those ones. So what I mean by that is, for example, the other night when I told you it was 9:30 at night and I started writing, if I'm someone who realizes like, hey, I got to get 2,000 words a week or so, that's kind of like the pace, and that week I sit down and I'm writing and I get to my 2,000 words, don't shut your laptop. Right? Like keep going. And that may mean that you kind of like run this episode all the way through, because there's a sense of some writers it almost feels a little manic when you hit those vibes and you get going into it. Lean into that one. That's okay. Many writers do fall into that flow. But at the end of the day, understand 20,000 words is the target and they are first drafts. The last thing I want you to understand is that there's a lot of accountability that you have. We do have a lot of it. That's when you meet your editor in about 2 weeks. They will be a key accountability partner for you. Each other will be accountability partners. Our weekly meetings will be those sorts of things. Plus, I have about sort of 40 hours almost of writing workshops that we'll have on the books over the next couple of months. So you can go on just on a Sunday night or Thursday night and jump in for 4 hours into a room where we do quiet writing. And you just go and sit there and write, but other people are there. It feels a little less painful when you're not doing it yourself. So it's really simple. Again, you can do it from wherever if you want to do it, but that's some accountability you'll have. So there's a lot of ways to get there. And again, the reason I say this one is it can be intimidating to think about this a little bit. Remember, here's the important thing as you run into this phase of starting to write. We spent a bunch of time to do some research. We've got some things down. Now is the effort to make things that are mediocre great. That's what we're trying to do. So we can make mediocre stories great, but we cannot make non-existent stories great, right? So if it's in your head and you can't get it out, like you're not going to get it out because we can't make it better. The core thing to understand is why we have this 20,000 mark is that from there you can craft this into a manuscript, but you can't make it into anything if you don't have it.